I see several people that are entering the chat room. Are you all excited? Thank you, Jason. I saw your one. I left a comment in the chat box. If you're able to see it, please drop a 1 in the chat box so I know we're all on the same page. Thank you for joining us. Today's webinar is in regards to greatest cheat sheet for adaptability. I know during the COVID concern, a lot of us are being forced to be in a situation where we have to adapt. So what better way to navigate this concern than to go over tools and information that will help us all moving forward. Oh, thank you. I see your comment, Steve. I received it. So without further ado, I just want to go over a couple housekeeping items. If you have a question during the webinar, this is a very interactive webinar. We ask that you please feel free to leave that question in the chat box. If you'd like to make a comment, you may do so by raising your hand. There is a feature next to your name in the drop-down box where you click the arrow that says more, where you're able to raise your hand so I know that you have a comment or you would like to say something, and I will go ahead and prompt you. We are very excited to have our special guest today, Dr. Esther Jackson. Dr. Jackson, I'm going to go ahead and request to start your video and turn it over to you. Hi, Dr. Jackson, can you hear me?
Hello, yes.
Hi.
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. Everyone else, can you hear us? I see a couple. All right, head nods. Perfect. So Dr. Jackson, please take it away.
Thank you so much. As Jasmine stated, we are just really excited to have you all with us for this particular presentation. It's something that I am very passionate about and looking forward to our interaction for the short time that we have together. So when we get into the idea of adaptability, I'm sure what comes to mind is we've already been adapting. Look at what's been dropped in our laps. Look at the position we're in, and I'm sure we have heard countless times we are in unprecedented times. How many times have we heard that over and over? These are unprecedented times. So the idea of adaptability is in the midst of what we're dealing with, what should that look like when it's done right? What is not characteristic of adaptability? So these are some things that I'd like to plant as thoughts in your mind, and hopefully you're able to walk away with a different perspective on adaptability, the idea of what you can do to improve yours, as well as what are some key resources that would be instrumental and help you in that journey. So that's something I'd like you to keep in mind, and hopefully that will get you going in the right direction by the end of our time together.
Are you still on the phone?
Mm-hmm.
Are you in an active call?
For
Yeah, but I'm muted.
our agenda, we are looking to get into the importance of adaptability, a history of the cues. I'll say more regarding what we mean by the cues when we get to that point. We will delve into an actual example of an AQ model, which ties into adaptability, and that will help transition us into discussion of the cheat sheet. And finally, we'll talk about a resource queue where I have a ton of links that will be advantageous to all of you when you're able to check those out. And so as we get ready to start, I would like to share a poll question. So Jasmine, if that's something that we can share with them. The question I'd like to ask you is, how would you rank the importance of adaptability on a scale of 1 to 5? How would you rank the importance of adaptability on a scale of 1 to 5? And if you could enter that in the chat. We are ranking 5 as it's a very big deal. 4 would be, it's pretty important. 3, no rush to get to adaptability, you know, when we get to it. 2, adaptability, not a big deal. Or 1, that's just a fancy word. So how would you rank the importance of adaptability? 5, very big deal. 4, pretty important. 3, no rush to get to it. 2, not a big deal. Or 1, just a fancy word. And you're entering one of those numbers in the chat.
So we're showing several 5s, Dr. Jackson, and I
Okay.
placed a 4.
Okay, awesome. All right, well, I'm glad you all feel that way about it. And what we want to do is really emphasize the idea that some may want to say adaptability is synonymous with change or synonymous with change management, or adaptability is I'm faced with a situation and I just have to deal with it.
Not to go do like 250 points.
So we are actually looking to take it beyond that and take a deeper dive into adaptability at your individual level, at your team level, as well as at the business level. For this particular segment, what I'm asking here, this next exercise, I'd like you to take it to the organization aspect now. Think about your organization. We know we're in a crisis. We know there's a lot going on, and the impact has been of such that it's not only changing the way we do business or changing the way we interact with one another. This is an impact on our lifestyle, our quality of life, and what we are experiencing even within our own personal households. So with all that coming into play, go to your organization in terms of your thoughts of how your organization is responding to the situation. And this is going to be another instance where we are utilizing some interaction, but this time I'd like you to use your annotate tool. And so with the annotate tool, if you are able to take a look on your screen and look for your toolbar, there should be an option in your Zoom toolbar that says annotate. And from there, we are going to an option that says stamp. And what I'd like you to do is once you find the stamp option, the pictures that are shown here, I'd like you to think about your organization's response in the midst of the current crisis. And would you say their response seems to be 1, on vacation, just sitting back, nothing to do, and just checking out the surroundings? Or 2, you know, these are instances where everything is just like puzzle pieces. We have no idea where to start, what's going on, how to piece things together. Or 3, we are in utter darkness and we cannot see the light of day. We are just trying to navigate our way through. Or 4, you know, we are on a journey to go where no one has gone before, as they say with Star Trek, and we are looking with some excitement as we launch into this adventure. Or 5, hey, we've had some successes, we are making leeway, and the team is excited, we're in gear. Or 6, you know, from one moment to the next, things are up and down for us. The moods are changing. So what would you say your organization's response has been to the current situation? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6? And I will go ahead and place mine. Any other responses with the annotate? And it's fine if you prefer to use the chat to enter your number, that is fine as well. Any other responses coming in, Jasmine?
I see a couple 5s,
Okay.
5s, and I see a 2.
Okay. Well, thank you all so much for participating in that and sharing your thoughts. concerning how your organization's take is. Reason for getting into that is I think it's really helpful to consider not only our personal perspectives as we did with the previous question and looking at our take with adaptability, but also the role we have within our organizations. We're being impacted as to how the organization is responding. And those are perspectives that mesh together that make for how successful we are and what we aim to do, where our mindset is, as well as what role we will take on to be a help or a hindrance to the progress that our organizations are making with the response to what's happening around us. Let's get into an actual definition, and I'm just going to clear our responses here. We're done for now with the annotation. What is adaptability? Well, it's one's ability to face and overcome changes and adversities. And that is a definition from Paul Stoltz, who is the author of The Adversity Quotient at Work. Another description of adaptability is the capacity to be modified for a new purpose. And if you think about those definitions, we have them both at play. With our current situation, we can also think about things that have taken place even prior to that. And considering what's going on, considering what was going on prior to, there are things that we face day in and day out that are examples of our ability to adapt. The traffic, when you're caught in traffic, you are looking at, how do I respond to that? How do I adapt to that? You miss a plane, you miss a train ride, you are held up because someone did not follow through with their portion of a project. These are instances where you can't say it's a matter of change and navigating change, because when we talk about change management, that's getting into an aspect of, oh, you're typically initiating a change and then taking steps to implement a type of process or a model where you're able to maintain control. With adaptability, we're talking about things that are typically out of our control and the change that is thrust upon us in a situation, and how you are able to still perform and be productive in the midst of those changes because you allow yourself to change, to adapt to the new situation. So we want to talk more about how to be successful in doing that. And it's going to start in the mind first. Why adaptability matters? Well, quite a few of you mentioned it is a very big deal. So we know it is pretty important. And we are seeing evidence of that with our experiences now. Some logos here are representative of organizations from back in the day and organizations we are seeing that are really up and coming in the now. What I'd like you to do is think about, what do you think the difference is between the organizations then and the organizations now? And that's pretty broad, but I'd like to get your thoughts. If you could put that in the chat. Some differences between the organizations then that we don't see around very much or at all, and then the organizations now that stay in the forefront of our minds. And you can enter that in the chat. Jasmine, do we have 1 or 2 responses come in?
I have not seen anything yet. I'll keep you posted.
Okay. Well, one thing I would like to say concerning a difference is, I'm not sure how many may recall Bennigan's. I used to love their Monte Cristo. And if you're not familiar with that, it's a type of ham and Swiss sandwich that is toasted and it's closed. That was just phenomenal, and it has the powdered sugar on it. And so they were known because they had a very unique type of menu. However, one of their shortcomings that led to their demise was the fact that they did not adjust, they did not versify their menu to cater to consumer demand. And that tended to be the case with quite a few organizations on this then side. The failure to cater to consumer demand, others encountered the issue of failing to change with the times. Whereas on the now side, we have organizations that were able to stay in existence and change. For example, Lego. They started way back in 1932, and they are still around and going strong. On the other hand, you have recent organizations on the up and coming, like Airbnb. I had to do a recent presentation on design thinking, and something that I researched was a book called The Airbnb Way. And it's a very interesting book that talks about how they started. And what was unique about their start was the fact that two of the gentlemen behind their startup were just gentlemen who were struggling to pay rent for their apartment in San Francisco. And they decided, since there was a marketing conference that was scheduled to come into town, they open up their room, get a couple of air mattresses, and see if they could get some takers who were interested in paying maybe 70, 80 bucks for a bed for a few nights during the conference. Whoever would have thought in 2008 they would be owners of a billion-dollar company from that type of start. So you're talking about folks who were presented in a situation where they're kind of backed in the corner, kind of placed in a position where they had to deal with changes, had to deal with being at a standstill and figuring out, how do you get out of this? Other companies, we've seen how the innovation has allowed them to not only adapt, but thrive and go forth. And that's something that we can see in action. And if we give ourselves opportunity, we can also be one to execute and build upon that same type of idea.
We have a couple of feedback statements from your
Yes.
presentation. We have comments regarding adapting to technology, organizations adapting to customers' needs and desires.
Definitely.
Yes, not being aware of changes around them.
I love that, especially with the technology and the changes that are around us, as we're going to get to that in one or two slides. But the idea that it's so easy to see, once you have your immediate situation turn out to be successful, or what's going on now is working well, it kind of blindsides you to, I don't need to adjust. I don't need to keep a pulse of what's happening around our business. I don't need to keep a pulse of what's happening around me because my here and now is okay.
Absolutely.
That could be deceiving.
We have several statements in regards to technology. The tech companies are utilizing social media platforms to market, and this allows them to be seen in every aspect of lives. The thens that have been replaced by the nows, the adjustment to the change of times, which is the new online movement.
That's awesome. And that presents a follow-up question as to, we may wonder, is it possible, had some of those other companies had the access or taken the initiative to tap into the use of technology like social media, if they were still in existence at the time, would that have allowed for a different future forecast for them? But for us, we know better, and we are learning what to do if we did not know already. Question, and thank you all for sharing that feedback. Question. Here's a situation for you. You wake up, you come outside your home, and this is what you see. What is your immediate response? And that could be your thought, a statement, or action? What is your immediate response? If you could enter that in the chat. Is there someone who might be interested in even sharing with the whole group? We can unmute you and allow you to share with the whole group. How do you think you would respond to a situation like this? Well, I will tell you, this was a reality that was connected to me in a way. It was the eve of Christmas Eve, and it was approximately 8 years ago. I woke up, came outside my condo, and there was an awning to our carport area that had fallen on 2 cars and half of a third car. It just so happened that my car was 2 or 3 cars away from this catastrophe. But it looked very similar to this, except the awning that had fallen was completely caved in on top of the other 2 cars. And all we could do was think, what a horrible thing to experience 2 days before the Christmas holiday. But that's the type of thing where, my goodness, this is something that was out of my control. This is something where conditions happen that I just have to face and figure out, how am I going to respond? And typically situations like that will provoke some type of emotional reaction before we can even consider reasonably what is an appropriate course of action to take. And this is just characteristic of what can happen when we don't tap into, let me take a pause, think about what my options are, and think about, first, let me assess the situation in conjunction with weighing my options, and then take my response from there. One thing that you all just mentioned dealt with being able to recognize when the environment has changed, when there's a change in the business climate, when we are experiencing advanced technology. So we just saw a situation that is very plausible, very realistic, where we have weather conditions, or we may have things out of our control, like what we're experiencing now, something happening socially in terms of the prevalence of illness that's impacting everyone. Well, we also have these instances with what's going on in the world around us in terms of what can happen with the business along with the environment, or a change in clientele and customers that triggers a response from us. Well, what is it that we need to do before we get into responding? Well, we need to consider what kind of change, what kind of impact is taking place before we can even consider what it is we need to do in response. So the idea here, voluntarily or involuntarily, adaptability is a must. But if you're not even in position to allow yourself to be observant, to recognize what's going on around you, what's going on that's impacting you and your role, what's going on impacting those that you service, or what's going on and impacting the business that is a part of what you're doing, then that may make you null to the change, or even in a position where you're not even able to recognize it. So these are things we can be conscious of. What I'd like you to think about is, can someone tell us an example in any of these categories, a change that was taking place even prior to COVID-19? Something that was going on in terms of a change in the environment, or a change in what it looked like the the demographics of your customers or your clients for your particular organization prior to COVID-19 or a change in the business climate? Any example you could recall before our current crisis?
Yes, we have a comment from Steve. Steve, I'm going to unmute you so you can ask your question.
Okay, Dr. Jackson, can you hear me?
I can hear you now, Steve.
Okay, sorry about that. Anyway, I had just been involved in a Zoom meeting that talked a lot about the different learning styles and applications based on what's happening after millennials, which is the Gen Z. And the Gen Z is probably totally different from what is going to be happening in the future and how we go to market, how we go ahead and look at business styles. So I was just wondering, have you had a chance to start looking at that generation to see how we could be able to be more informed about the Gen Z group?
That is an excellent question, Steve, and thank you for asking. Yes, I have started that. And it's funny you should ask that because my actual doctoral project for my Doctor of Education degree dealt with the generational differences concerning preferences for technology in the workplace as they are completing professional development and training. However, for my project, I dealt with 4 generations, the 4 that came right before Gen Z. So the generations I dealt with were the traditionalists, baby boomers, Gen Xers, Gen Y, also the millennials, another name for Gen Y. And Gen Z was, slowly but surely coming in. However, there wasn't a lot of research for them. And so what we've been doing now, and some of the work that I do, for example, I am working as a project manager and instructional designer for a local consulting company, but I also work as a national chapter advisor for ATD Detroit ATD, excuse me, at the national level, and then a past president for ATD Detroit. Well, one of the key focus areas for us is we need greater student representation within our associations at the national level as well as at the local level, because we are hearing all the time, they are the generation of tomorrow. Well, they are also leaders of today, as we're seeing. So if we don't take the time to find out what attracts them, what caters to them, what is going to help them and promote them to be loyal to the organization, then we miss out. So what we are seeing now is one thing that we have found it instrumental to do is take a look at what opportunities we can do to go and actually see if the door is open with universities allowing us to come in. So with my organization, job-wise, we've opened the door and allowed for site visits, asked them to come in and take a look at the work we do. With the professional association ATD, for the local level ATD Detroit, what we are doing is going to the universities and colleges and having on-site events and asking them to be a part, or asking them to allow us to be a part of things they already have scheduled. And so those are opportunities that we've tapped into to actually make that connection and have a forum where they're able to give us their feedback, allow us to learn about their interests and what we can do in adjusting our work operations as well as our organizational strategies to entice them to be a part. So that's definitely something that's been key for us. We know technology is a big part of that, but there are also other things because they are also very much engrossed in things like the societal aspect. What is it that organizations are doing to be involved with the community to help improve the community? So there are a lot of things that cater to that particular organization, but it requires us to do some research and also be interested in learning more about those generations and not just assuming that, okay, there's stereotypes, and let me just go with what the stereotypes are saying. So that's a big mistake there. So I
Yeah,
hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it did. And the thing that I found that was very interesting about the information that was given to me was that this group is very entrepreneurial.
Yes.
That 72% of these people are very entrepreneurial. So I think it's going to support what we're just coming off now with the small businesses, because you're going to see more small businesses start to come with this group in comparison to what we had with the millennials. The millennials wanted to go ahead and just say, hey, yeah, let's work, we'll work together and all this, and I'll come to you if I want you or not. So it's going to be, I think, more of a link to the baby boomers. This Gen Z is going to be linked more to the baby boomers, which by the time that Gen Z comes about, those baby boomers will be out of the workforce and everything else. So I'm just thinking it's going to be an interesting dynamics, and we as business people have to be sure that we're ready to support their activity.
Definitely, definitely. And you bring up a good point too, just to belabor it a little bit more, Steve, the gig economy. I mean, that's been a big deal. That's been something that's definitely been in the foresight across the board for a lot of different industries. Everyone's developing, you know, a side gig here or there to do certain things. Well, it's kind of forced people to consider what kind of gig they can take on to propel them to be entrepreneurs. So that's a very good point. And we'll probably see a great deal more of that with the other generations in addition to Gen Z. So that would be a very interesting research project for somebody, Steve. So if anybody is on the line. All right, thanks so much for sharing that. I have a quote here. Adaptability is being able to adjust to any situation at any given time. And that's John Wooden. And in that adjustment, I mentioned earlier that there are some other aspects of us that are triggered as we go through adjusting to a change in a situation, or when changes are thrust upon us that we have not initiated. And so I would like to highlight what are called the cues. And this is also content from another presentation that I've done regularly, because I do some conferences and speaking engagements and webinars in addition to this. And one of the topics I address is the 3 cues of leadership, and I call it leading with the right cues. And the cues just represent quotient. And we may come across material, you may come across research content that refers to not just adaptability, but the adaptability quotient. All that is doing is taking adaptability and assigning a measure to it. So it's the same thing. It's just that when you think of it as AQ, typically there has been some type of assessment or some type of testing instrument done to try to put a number or measure to relate to someone's level of adaptability. And the goal is still to have a high adaptability. We just call it, oh, that person has a high AQ. Or that person, oh, they need to work on their adaptability. So you may say that person has a low AQ. And the goal for all of us is to be high with AQ or high with adaptability. So let's talk about the cues here. First one, 1912, we were introduced to the intelligence quotient. And we are all probably pretty familiar with that. That came on the scene thanks to William Stern. There was a test that was created and established to help determine someone's IQ level. Well, what we found as of late, within the past 30 years or so, is IQ is something that you really are not able to change. Your IQ, once it reaches a certain level, that's it for the rest of your life. In 1995, we were introduced to emotional intelligence, or the emotional quotient, by Daniel Goleman. Those of you who may be familiar with his EQ model, It's a model based on 4 quadrants, dealing with self-awareness, dealing with social awareness, social management, as well as self-management. And so it's basically revolving around 4 essential areas, where one of those areas actually relates to adaptability. And so you could say that adaptability is one factor that's involved in the emotional aspect. And one main reason for that is, what happens when we experience change? Well, most of the time, it's going to trigger some type of emotional reaction. We saw back with the image of the tree that had fallen on a car. Let me come outside and I see a tree has fallen on my car. Regardless of how it came about, it's going to trigger some type of emotional response. Okay. With what we're dealing with now, people adjusting to the situation, not being able to go and frequent families, their extended friends, go out to dinner even. It's triggering an emotional response. Dealing with loved ones or friends who have this medical condition is triggering an emotional response. And then we get to AQ, the adaptability quotient, also known as the adversity quotient. And that's looking at, okay, I have these changes that I've encountered. How do I respond to them and be able to still keep going, be able to still perform, still be productive? And that was introduced to us a couple of years after EQ by Paul Stoltz. Other cues that have come into being have been ones like XQ by Dr. Stephen Covey. He presented the execution quotient, which gets into a measure of how effective someone is when it comes to executing on things. And one that I added here, which is yet to be determined, I'm just guessing and assuming that I feel pretty confident we're going to see some type of cue that comes into play as a result of COVID-19. But of course, there's going to be a ton of research once we get into summarizing the lessons learned as we come out of this COVID-19 experience. So any comments or questions about the cues?
We have a comment, wow.
Okay.
We also have 2 comments prior to the cues, if you'd like me to give those to you for reference.
Sure.
Give me 1 second and I will pull up. It's freezing on me. Okay, there is a question in regards to company takeovers, specifically private manufacturer companies purchased by a global Japanese company in this example. There's also a question in regards to many of the clients are global, so we have been involved with working more virtually. My concern is about getting more people on board.
Okay, that is a wonderful question. And I would definitely say we are going to touch on some of those things when we get to the actual cheat sheet and the resource cues. But initially, one thing is the emotional piece. We are under the belief in many instances that, oh, don't get so emotional, stay focused, stay logical. Well, that's a mistake when you think about situations where it brings in relevance to our human aspect, and you cannot ignore that emotional piece there. If there's a takeover that's pending with the company, that's going to provoke some type of emotion for me, because I have to figure out, okay, what does this mean for my job situation? What does this mean for my family? And what does this mean concerning if I still have a job? Am I expected to relocate? Am I expected to pick my family up and go somewhere else and deal with all of that transition aspect with the job change or takeover, merger, acquisition? Is it going to be that, oh no, right now I have a job, but I'm on pins and needles because I don't know what's going to happen shortly after the takeover? I mean, it provokes something that is emotionally relevant. And for that not to be considered, that can provoke a more negative response for people and cause them to have a resistance and opposition to the change, which is definitely going to impact adaptability as well. So you have change management and AQ going hand in hand in situations like that. So for one, we found that best course of action is definitely address the emotional relevance and let people know the organization understands and the organization is not only sympathizing but empathizing with what the experience is doing. And that's covered with EQ, which ties into change management and adaptability. And then also helping people to see, we're hearing it all the time with COVID-19, we're in this together. Well, that's a similar idea that needs to be portrayed and communicated when you're talking about staff having to deal with changes thrust upon them. Still promote the idea of everyone who's a part of the organization means something to us, and we're in this together. And we want to do the best we can to ensure that things are done as well as possible for everyone's best interest. Doesn't guarantee, of course, everyone's going to have a job when things are said and done. But when people see that transparency in terms of you being as honest as possible, no, all of the information and details can't always be shared, but you're being as honest as possible with them and not sugarcoating things or turning a blind eye or turning your back to what the truth is or the human aspect of it. People respect that. Was there another question you mentioned, Jasmine?
I believe you covered them both.
Okay.
There's a new one that just came in. There's a basic fear for all in this transition. Are there measurables that can be used to gauge employees' EQ?
Yes, that is not something we are actually covering in this particular presentation, but that is something I've covered in presentations I've done on emotional intelligence and on leading with the right cues. Yes, so I'd be happy to forward some information on that, and I will be providing my contact information at the end. And just a little tidbit, the AQ is something I became passionate about because of my interest in emotional intelligence, or EQ first. So it's really phenomenal to see how intertwined they are, but I would definitely say that EQ is the larger umbrella under which AQ falls. So thank you all for those questions and comments. Here's just a little bit of data I wanted to share that really speaks to some of the change impacts that constitute or warrant the focus that we need to give adaptability. And again, recapping to several of you mentioning that, yes, it's a very big deal. You ranked it as a 5. Well, for one, we have data here sharing that 94% of Fortune 1000 companies have been facing supply chain disruptions as a result of what we are experiencing now. And that's probably a bit higher now, even, because this is from March. Prior to COVID-19, 29% of folks were already working from home. So we know the numbers have skyrocketed now with various things that have been put in place, such as stay-at-home orders, almost 100% across the country and the like, even though we see that that's changing now as we are hearing that we are getting over the peak for the crisis. And hopefully that continues to be the case so we can start trying to see how resilient we can be. 0.4% price drop for consumers. And they're saying that is the most in the last 5 years as of March 2020. And 0.4% doesn't seem like a lot, but we are talking about like with the gross domestic product. So that's at the overall realm, not just looking at one city or state's economy. We're talking about the country. And then another stat showed that there was a 1,200% increase in online account registrations for people creating accounts to do online shopping. Again, that was from March, so that has definitely increased for sure. With the social distancing, with the closure of businesses and organizations. So these numbers are just reflecting the fact that there is a forced adaptation that has been placed upon us if we are to not only continue and function, but thrive. And so what are some things that we need to consider in doing that? Well, for one, have a partial goal to be resilient. Adaptability works along with resilience. And that can be described as not just adjusting to overcome and thrive in adverse or challenging situations, but also being able to quickly recover from the difficulties. So the adaptability is, okay, I can adjust and allow myself to change due to new circumstances or new conditions. Well, the resiliency is more so implying I'm able to not only overcome, but I can bounce back if I've been offset by a challenge or by some type of adversity. And so they still work very well as partners. And the goal is for us to be able to do both. What does that look like in business? So some key questions that I have listed here. We're looking at it from the business aspect, and then I'll get into it from the individual aspect. But what's the current state of your business? And so this is focused at the organizational level if you are one who has a role in your business, as well as if you are the business owner. Looking at who is your audience. Has it changed as a result of what's going on with COVID-19? Have you had, what kind of adjustments do you need to make in how you market your product or your service? Where can you enhance the marketing if your marketing is still applicable, you're still able to do the same marketing you were doing? Where can you enhance it to take it up a notch or a few notches? What internal or external changes are needed? Well, we know there are definitely changes so many organizations have had to do with the doors being closed, with folks not being able to go into a physical office if they are not a business that is an essential service. So significant changes internally and externally. But what can you do to avoid saying it's just a lost cause, we can't do anything? You know, that's not an option. Let's look at what it is you can do. How can you be innovative? Can you look at the glass half full and still have a resilient attitude? Mentally, we can overcome this. Let's think about how, who's involved, and let's put our brains together. So those are the kinds of things that should come to mind. And where do we have opportunity to partner? Where can you work with another organization? Where can you work with someone else who is trying to be up and coming with their business? Okay, that's another aspect of being resourceful and looking at what you can do to be resilient. One example that we have is with our ATD Detroit chapter. We looked at opportunities to host more events virtually in partnership with other ATD chapters in other states, because we had to shut down and change schedule for all of our live events, similar to a lot of other companies. So it was something that was common across the board. Well, what can we do to pool our resources where everybody can come out on top? But that is something that is taking a risk. That is something that involves being resourceful and something that involves thinking as an opportunist, because you have to have a willingness to expose yourself to some degree in order to be willing to open yourself to strategic alliances or strategic partnerships. At the individual level, on the team level, we're talking about looking at self-perceptions of yourself. What are the self-perceptions team members have of themselves? Is there the ability to continue working and do it virtually or remotely? Is there a willingness to adjust to a virtual environment? So that's that mindset. That's getting into the flexibility aspect. What are the skills and experience with the technology that needs to be used? That's getting into the versatility aspect. So are the people flexible as well as versatile? Do you have access to the tools and technology for communicating virtually? And also, if you don't have it, what can you do to get that access? If you can't purchase it, is this something you can partner to obtain? And then what skills are needed for yourself as well as for the workers, for your team to be successful and keep that communication going internally as well as outside the organization with those customers or clients who need to have that regular interaction with you. And then ways to keep that interested, to keep them engaged, to keep them on the level where they are able to recognize with the communication that you're in it together. I mean, because words are not sufficient alone. We know actions speak much louder than words. So some thoughts behind adaptability, what it looks like. If you look at a person or you engage with a person, what will cause you to say, oh, that seems like a person who has high adaptability or a person with high AQ? Some of those things that you will see within that person should be, they are a collaborator. They are asking questions. They are an inquirer. They want to hear the opinions of others. They are a continuous learner, looking at how they can improve themselves as well as the team and improve upon their role. They are an optimist, not one looking at, oh my goodness, I don't know what we're going to do now. We just forget it. We might as well shut things down. Oh, I guess my job is done for. I need to find something else. So that is not something you see in someone who has a high AQ. So you're definitely going to see them speaking and along the thought line of someone who sees potential, who sees opportunity, who sees, we need to be innovative. What are some ideas? Here's some thoughts that I have. And they are a risk taker. They don't mind experimenting and trying things out. AQ is something that is so valuable that even before COVID-19, a lot of my research was showing that there are different CEOs saying this is something that they're looking for in potential candidates for roles that they have in leadership. Well, it's something that they're looking to see how can they measure it and how can they really pinpoint how to recognize it in potential folks that they hire. So this is something that is definitely in high demand. Even when you can't do or say anything to change a difficult situation, you always have a say in your perspective of what's happening, which ultimately influences your feelings about it. And that's by Dr. Travis Bradberry of Emotional Intelligence 2.0. Excellent book if you haven't checked it out. This is an adaptability model. I'm just going to highlight it. And this will be included in the follow-up materials provided to you. But there was an article I did on adaptability last year for our ATD association, the TD magazine that they publish. It was in the November issue. And within that adaptability article, I covered this model that I created, which focused on what you can do to promote adaptability skill development with your staff. So it begins with assessing the AQ status, gets into looking at what steps need to be taken to determine the needs of the target audience, analyzing what resources are in place, what resources need to be obtained to provide the AQ skill development, creating an action plan for that by preparing it, and then actually executing and training them. This is something that I was working on customizing to businesses as well, because COVID-19 has made it so relevant. So that is actually something I have in process, how to customize this model as a business approach to AQ. But it still has strong relevance to how we develop ourselves, how we develop our people, and what we can do to promote AQ skill development as a high priority. Change is the only constant in life. One's ability to adapt to those changes will determine your success in life. and that is Benjamin Franklin. And so with the closure to this, the cheat sheet for adaptability, first, applying AQ model. I gave you one example, the one I created, but there are others out there. One additional one will be included in the materials that are forwarded to the attendees on this session. Number two, take an AQ pause. Take a pause, assess what the vibe is, what it seems like things are looking like for yourself, for the team, for the business. And we're talking about how does it seem like the team is responding to the new conditions, the changes that have been thrust upon us. That's taking a pulse. Identify the challenges. Okay, now that we see where we stand, what the changes are, what's the challenge for us to move forward now? Be flexible, innovative, a team player, and willing to learn. There's a lot packed in that one intentionally, but they work together. 5, communicate with the team and set goals. And I didn't want this to just be set AQ goals. The communication piece is important because you're talking about not just goals for yourself, but you want to involve the team in what types of goals need to be identified at the team level as well. 6, research resources available to meet your needs. A few of the links I will be sharing with you include links to free tech tools, links to the Facebook Resource Hub, a link to Zoom, which ever popular, everyone is using now for that virtual connection, that virtual meeting tool that's needed. 7, practice ways to improve your AQ and the team's or business AQ. Some of those ways to improve your AQ that I used to talk about before COVID-19, when I did previous training on this, it was dealing with do things like driving a different route on your way to work, not going the same route every day, getting feedback from other people when you are dealing with certain situations, people in your household or people that you work closely with, and asking them about how you respond to certain things. And of course, you're talking about people who are maybe like close confidants that you can trust the feedback that they give you and learn from it as well as build upon it. Other ways to improve your AQ would be thinking about, okay, reflection on how you typically respond to situations and how positive or how negative those responses have been, and looking for opportunities to improve that way. And then lastly, encourage yourself, encourage your team. And in the midst of that encouragement, we're talking about thinking about your mindset. Are you doing positive talk or are you doing negative talk? We have enough negativity around us, but if you're compounding that with your own internal negativity, that's not helping at all. And the biggest help you can be is to be your number one fan and remind yourself, I have this, I got this, and I can make it happen no matter what. That's the cheat sheet. And so, does anyone recognize the scene here? This is a movie scene. Anyone recall the movie?
Dirty Dancing.
Dirty Dancing.
Do I win? Do I win?
Oh, that's not dope.
This movie is a classic in my eyes.
Don't
because
put baby in the corner.
in this particular scene, Johnny, and my apologies for those who aren't familiar with how the movie goes, but Johnny is telling Baby's parents, Baby is the girl there in the corner, that nobody puts her in the corner. She has spent most of the movie getting him to be innovative, getting him to speak out and not be pushed in a box and not allowed to be himself and explore, the creativity he has in dancing and all that. And so the thought with nobody puts baby in the corner is the same thing for us. Regardless of the COVID-19 and the other things going on, we are still alive. We are still ready and able to come back. We are in this together, but don't wait for someone to tell you that you're in the corner and you need to come out. We have to recognize, maybe even the idea that, no, I'm not even in the corner. I'm just forced to think of a better way, a more efficient way, or alternative or creative way to do what I did before or to do something different or better, because I am still going to be productive and successful in my efforts. You are not in a corner, and don't wait for someone to have to tell you that you need to come out the corner. So adaptability, the new game changer. Leave your comfort zone. Try something new. Recognize the opportunity for growth and innovation. Keep pace with the changes and be flexible. And be resilient in your mindset and your actions. These are the resources that will be shared with you. They are all links, and there are additional ones I have included in a handout that will be provided. So I'm not sure what kind of time we have for questions.
We have a couple of minutes. I just want to
Okay.
take this time while the questions are coming in to thank you, Dr. Esther Jackson. This was so wonderful to receive so much quality information. You did an excellent presentation. And I actually wanted to kick off a question in regards to the adaptability and the changes that we're doing at the Southfield Chamber of Commerce. We have experienced our former business model of having sole in-person interaction regarding our services and how we show up for the community. Upon the COVID concern, we obviously had to do a shift and pivot to the way that we were able to service and show up for our community. During that shift, it was, I think, a little bit easier for us on the technological side to be able to quickly become adaptable. We're now going into a full month of offering webinars. And
wonderful.
Yes, just being able to engage. But during that month, we've done webinars, we've done virtual meetings, interviews, member support services, and really, I guess our main pain point is positively reinforcing to individuals who are a part of the Chamber of Commerce that are solely in the business model of in-person, to basically tell them ways that they can pivot to. And we want to be able to do that in a positive way, out of fear, and not necessarily have conversations with them that leave them stuck. We're noticing that a lot of our members right now are stuck. And although we've been able to pivot, being able to service so many businesses and so many business leaders, do you have a suggestion of how we can encourage other individuals who have small businesses that have a physical product or solely offer services in person on how they can move forward in a positive direction and how we can support them without feeling like we're being pulled in so many directions?
That is a great question. And I have been involved in a few presentations that have covered that very same point. One thing that I've seen pretty often, and one thing that we've even discussed within my organization as well as with the associations I'm involved with, has been to really make resources and tools available that assist individuals as well as entities in addressing their fears. So oftentimes it's a fear. One, a fear of changing from what has been their traditional way of operating. Two, the fear of technology. That can be very fearful. You know, I have to use something and figure out how it works and make sure I'm using it correctly. And then I have to tell someone else how to do it in order for them to be a patron of my business, my product, my service. So to address those fears, what kind of tools, what kind of job aid, what kind of maybe cheat sheet can be provided to them that kind of walks them through or simplifies operation of the technology. Another option that I've seen that is very common is to also have a type of informal forum that allows for people to ask questions, that allows for people to get a walkthrough as to, okay, how does this Zoom thing work? Or a walkthrough, hey, you know, we are doing this networking thing, and in the process of doing this networking, we want to walk you through some helpful pointers and tips on the use of technology. And then another would be to encourage them to partner, resource partners, where there are organizations that specialize in the technology, and they are also willing to provide the free training. So those are a few that come to mind right offhand that have been pushed quite a bit for organizations to tap into, to really take that step that can really be challenging or overwhelming in terms of the adjustment.
Thank you so much. We have a question from Dr. Randy. Dr. Randy, feel free to unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your question.
I think I am unmuted.
We
Do you
can
hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Really, it's not so much a question, and I join you in saying that I own an interpretation and translation firm, and obviously I'm a service exclusively. And what I've done as a woman business owner is I've really been partnering with other women in the service industry to try to help them, feel that they can do this. Often those of us in the service industry, we're used to the face-to-face and sort of learning how to pivot. Maybe because I have a few more years of experience and I went through the 2008 recession as well, and learn flexibility. But I think really it's important, maybe not even though there's just a handful of us having the opportunity to listen to you, Dr. Jackson, but to also maybe, like as you were talking about the Southfield Chamber, maybe just sort of pairing a couple people up, one who's been working in it more comfortably and maybe someone who's looking to develop those skills. I know I had all of my interpreters download Zoom as soon as, because we provide interpreters to the courts.
Okay.
So I totally follow you. I really have enjoyed your presentation.
Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Randy, for sharing that, because that brings up a very valid point to reinforce what we've been talking about through this presentation, is the fact that if you are willing to collaborate and willing to learn, that goes a long way. One thing I didn't mention is some of what Paul Stoltz talks about in his book, The Adversity Quotient at Work, is the fact that we are hardwired to and prone to adapt. Part of our hardwiring stems back to our youth and how we've learned to respond to situations. However, we mentioned that IQ is something, once you have it, that's the way you are. Well, EQ and AQ are not like that. You can change them. So you may be hardwired one way. You may be one who, as a child and on into your adulthood, you've been one who's been characteristic of losing your emotions or getting emotionally out of control. But that's something, if you are willing to assess where you are, you can change it. So if I'm willing to assess where I am and see that, I've been fearful because of so-and-so. I've been fearful because I'm always accustomed to having control. And now that I don't have control because I have to adjust to this new environment, let me adjust myself and let me be willing to change and learn. So some of the key characteristics we talked about, but thank you for sharing that comment.
Well, thank you so much for your presentation, Dr. Jackson. I'm going to Thank you. I'm going to turn over to the President and Executive Director of the Southfield Chamber of Commerce, Jason Blanks. Jason, are you with us? Can you hear me?
I can, thank you. Dr. Jackson, I just want to say thank you for your invaluable insight into adaptability, even emotional intelligence. I have been a friend and a student of you for a while. And so this was, for me, a really good opportunity to learn more about a topic that I can see a lot of myself in some of your slides, and I can see areas where I can have the opportunity to grow. So I just wanted to make sure I said that up front before I get into my canned speech. So thank you again. And Dr. Randy, I definitely would like to work with you in partnering in the near future, Dr. Randy Franklin. All right. So in closing, I just want to thank everyone for lending us your time and participating in this very worthwhile and beneficial webinar. We do have several webinars that are coming up in the very near future. Next week on Tuesday, we have a webinar with DM Payroll. They are a payroll company that is working or looking to work with small and medium-sized companies to offer some additional remote resources in enhancing the payroll concerns that you may have. I also have a really great event, which is our and that the DM Payroll is at 12 noon. We also have a small business town hall, and I've been working with State Representative Kara Bolden, our Senator Jerry Moss. We're going to have 3 guest speakers on that town hall, which is going to be a webinar on 4/23. So that's on a Thursday, if I'm not mistaken, at 5 p.m. The Lieutenant Governor Gilchrist is going to be on there. The former Lieutenant Governor Brian Kelly will be on there, and our current Congressman Brenda Lawrence, Congresswoman Brenda Lawrence will be in on that webinar. It is a limited space availability, meaning we only have the opportunity to have 100 people come in. So if you're interested, the link will be up on our chamber website, and I can also email you the link, the Zoom meeting link as well. The Southport Area Chamber has opportunities to partner with businesses similar to Dr. Randy Franklin's business. We also have enhanced services. We can provide email blasts. We can provide opportunities to do media assessments as well as business assessments. Please feel free to go to our website, which is www.southfieldchamber.com. Our contact information is in there as well. My personal email is director@southfieldchamber.com. Feel free to email me directly, and I can get you connected to any of the resources that we have available. I would also like to thank Jasmine for moderating this event. You did an excellent job, and thank you everyone for your time. Please have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you, Jasmine, as well, and thank you, Jason. And I second the motion, Jasmine. You were phenomenal, so I appreciate that.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.